All right, with two major Hollywood divorces happening, Bethenny Frankel and, of course, Kim Kardashian, plenty of legal drama out there.
Is Kardashian getting divorced? That's the question.
Who knows?
All right, attorney Jonathan Burns is here today. He's got updates on these cases and some other juicy ones from Hollywood. Good to see you, Jonathan.
Good to see you guys, too. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Before we get to the fun stuff, let's talk about, this is a little bit serious, and it has to do with what news came out yesterday about concussions, Junior Seau, and people who were studying his brain.
Right, no, exactly. So scientists at NIH confirmed yesterday that Junior Seau was suffering from basically a debilitating brain disease called CTE, and that was caused by about 2 decades of concussions and hits to the head. So it's kind of bringing the lawsuit. I mentioned a couple months ago now that about 4,000 former NFL players filed a class action lawsuit against NFL claiming that they knew there was a direct link between concussions and long-term brain damage. So this finding by scientists in NIH further substantiates their claims.
So it really means bad news for the NFL.
It does. They've taken a proactive stance in terms of safety measures and employing safety measures, but the lawsuit they're facing right now is very, very serious. And there's, these players have suffered significant injury and significant life-changing, altercations as a result of that.
So could the league argue, hey, you knew the risks, you signed up to play?
Yeah, they could say that, and they have said that. They knew, obviously, there's inherent risk in playing football, but if the league knew there's a direct link between concussions and long-term brain damage, and they failed to warn and failed to take safety precautions, and that's something they could be ultimately liable for.
And this is that extra piece of information that had been missing.
Exactly.
Until yesterday.
And there's about 34 other players who have been diagnosed with CTE as well, and they've also suffered depression and suicidal tendencies as well.
All right. Well, let's move on to the Bethenny Frankel news, filing for divorce from her hubby of just almost 3 years?
Almost 3 years, yeah. So she filed for divorce right around the holiday time. And we all know she's a real housewife and obviously a skinny girl mogul with her alcohol franchise. So she's a very well-off individual. And what people are coming up and kind of questioning is, what is her demands in the divorce? She's kind of demanding things that seem kind of outlandish, in addition to the typical things like full custody of their 2-year-old daughter and, retroactive child support. She's also allegedly asking for him to get a life insurance policy and for him to name her and her daughter the sole beneficiaries.
What?
Which seems a little odd. So people are very, very kind of questioning that motivation there.
And they have a prenup, but what about all the money that they jointly made because they both worked together on the Skinny Girl project, and they both did the reality show together?
Right. So the prenup won't necessarily classify that type of earnings because those were joint things that they kind of accumulated, those assets they accumulated together over the course of their marriage. So those, it depends on the court ends up basically dispensing those assets, but it most likely 50-50 in terms of what was allocated per individual.
Wow. So, it's kind of a question in my mind. If she has so much money, $55 million?
Yeah, that's what they're saying, yeah.
Why would she go to these lengths to try to really stick it to him?
You know what? It's just everybody's questioning that. No motivation or no internal motive from her has been really established. But she's also, mind you, she's also seeking normal things. So she wants, full occupancy of their condominium in New York and typical things. And ultimately, you reach some type of resolution in the middle. So you see oftentimes in divorce proceedings, the sides are at very far extremes, and they ultimately meet in the middle.
What about the full custody of the baby? Because he seems like a very hands-on, responsible dad. Is that uncommon?
Well, that's going to be very, very difficult, unless there's some, drug or abuse or any type of issue with one of the parents. It's very difficult for one parent to get full custody. All
right. Can we move on to Kim Kardashian? Because I love this, that Kim and Kanye are having a baby.
Right.
But because she's technically still married to, what's his face, Humphreys?
Yeah.
Legally, you've forgotten already his name.
Legally, it's basically his baby.
Well, technically, California law is very, very interesting because she is still legally married to Chris Humphries, and under California law, there's a presumption that the husband of a pregnant woman is indeed the biological father. So,
well, that's a broad assumption.
Right. Yeah, especially this day and age, and especially in California too. But so if Chris wanted to, it's unlikely he will. He could, push for child custody, and at that point, Kim and Kanye would have to prove that Kanye is actually the biological father and not Chris. So that's a stretch. No one's really suggesting Chris would do that, but under California law, he is presumed to be the father of Kim's baby.
So if there's, why doesn't, she's moved on, he's moved on, why don't they just get the divorce.
Yeah, and well, Kim's saying he's very vindictive and he's kind of really, trying to get back at her. And what he's claiming that he wants her to come forward and admit to the marriage being a fraud and basically give him the $2 million ring back. But she's done neither of the two. So
well, what does she need with the $2 million ring? I mean,
knows?
it sounds like a lot to us, but in her world, she could give that up.
Especially with dating Kanye, he's pretty well off too. So they do pretty well for themselves.
Situation. It's like Leave It to Beaver, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, right.
All right, Hulk Hogan and a sex tape. First, ew.
Ooh, yeah.
Second, what's the latest?
Yeah, so back in October of 2012, he filed a lawsuit against a website called Goddard.com for $100 million. And he also filed a lawsuit in state court against a lady named Heather Glim, who was in the sex tape with him, he claimed that she basically, recorded the tape without his knowledge and then leaked it to the press without his knowledge as well. He has since dismissed the lawsuit against the website company in federal court and then later refiled it this week in state court, and he's trying to consolidate the two lawsuits. So oftentimes you consolidate lawsuits because it's easier to litigate when you kind of litigate all the issues together.
Oh, there's got to be a reason for it, so that's why he did that.
Yeah, it's cheaper to litigate because you're litigating in two separate forums, and that gets more expensive when you're dealing with the same issues, the same witnesses, the same type of evidence.
So he actually thinks that she's the one that leaked the tape in the first place, right?
Right. Yeah, he was on HuffPost Live talking about he had no knowledge and all things of the sort, and it's been very damaging. So he's seeking $100 million against the website. All
righty. Casey Anthony back in court, too. Now, she was convicted of lying to authorities, and she wants those charges reversed or dropped. How did that go?
So it's still, the appeal process is still moving forward there. The court hasn't made a final determination. But ultimately, if you guys recall, when the police got first wind of, young Kaylee missing, she told the authorities that a lady named Zenata Gonzalez had taken it, her former nanny. Ultimately, that lady was cleared of all wrongdoing, and, obviously the investigation took a detour because of her lying. So she was brought up on 4 misdemeanor charges of obstruction of justice and lying to police, and then she ultimately appealed those. And now the court's making a final determination on those.
Well, now, is she fighting the fact that she thinks that she didn't lie or that she didn't have representation?
Well, she's fighting the fact. Well, she's fighting the conviction on the 4 misdemeanor counts of obstruction and lying to police. So obviously we have an appellate process for a reason, so she can appeal that conviction.
Okay. Funk singer George Clinton, now he's been ordered to turn over the copyrights to his songs to his attorneys.
Yeah.
Why?
Now, this is a really interesting case. I've never seen a case like this before. George Clinton was in severe legal troubles from 2005 to 2008, hired a pretty high-profile law firm. They worked great for him, had some great outcomes for him. Ultimately, he never paid them. So they filed a lawsuit last year for about $1.5 million. They claimed that he owed about $1.5 million in back pay. Ultimately, the court determined that he had paid about $340,000, so he owed a little over $1 million, but poor George Clinton had no money. So they couldn't recoup any of the funds, any of the money that they were owed. So the court, instead of making him have a money judgment, they said, well, we're going to give your law firm the copyrights to 4 of your songs, and they can basically use them in whatever way they see fit. So most likely they'll sell like the licensing rights to be in commercials or on TV or in movies. And once they recoup the money that they're owed, then the copyrights get transferred back to George Clinton.
Well, at least he gets his copyrights back.
Exactly.
Eventually.
So it's not a bad deal for George Clinton at all, really, if you think about it.
Okay, just could take a little time for the lawyers to get their money, right?
Exactly.
Jonathan Burns, thanks so much for coming in.
All right, thank you
Always
guys.
Fun.